Welcome back to another episode of Supergene Unleashed. Today, I'm joined by Abigail Langridge, who is a woman on a mission to give time back to women in leadership roles. As the creator of the Brain Dump Blueprint, she's known for working live in real time with high achieving female executives who are ready to stop drowning in their to do lists and finally take control. Abby doesn't just talk strategy, she's right there in the moment, helping women reclaim their clarity, confidence, and their calendars. So, if you've ever wished someone could swoop in and make it all manageable again, this is the conversation that you need to hear. And Abigail, you described what you do as creating time for women in leadership. That's an incredibly bold statement and honestly a powerful one that certainly caught my attention. So I want to ask you, what does that actually look like day to day, and how did you arrive at that mission?
Thank you for a wonderful intro. That's amazing. I was listening to that thinking, wow, she sounds really cool. um, so, yeah, it is a bold statement, and it took me a while to happily share that because I think you really need some confidence to deliver that, and that's what I do now, basically. So I don't really hide behind it anymore. It's actually what I do. So in the day to day and how that actually looks like, it's about putting these women back into their own lives, basically, because quite often we all live really busy lives. And when you've got careers that are CEO, managing director level, and you've got big teams, and you've got a lot of responsibility in work, as well as people leaning on you outside of work, whether you've got a family, everyone has a personal life in some degree or another. Um, and it's a lot, right, to show up for ourselves then, and it's us that gets pushed back down the list because there is only enough time for certain things, and it we don't see ourselves as a priority. So when I say that I create that time for them, that's exactly what I do. So in to give an example, it's about them sharing their diaries with me live. We work live, just as we are talking live right now. They share their diaries in the moment because I don't see the point of giving them anything else to do. They've already got lots of things to do
Mm-hmm.
outside of then talking to me. So we do a lot of things on the call. So any firefighting, any quick wins, any emails, any text messages, checking in with the nanny, whatever that might look like, we do it there and then because we want to clear as much as we can straight away because it gives that clarity immediately. They share their diaries in real time, and it's about brutally prioritizing what needs to be done and what has to be done by the end of that day. Are you going to lose money? Are you going to lose a client? What's actually going to happen? A real serious life consequence if those things on your list don't get done. Things like delegation are pulled into the mix as well, because quite often, I'm sure we'll come to this, but just to quickly touch on it, a really common issue is that these women, and we all suffer from this. We all want to do the stuff ourselves, so it's about brutally prioritizing to make sure that what they are doing is specifically what they should be doing for their zone of genius, for whatever their job, their business looks like. If they're a lawyer, for example, they should be doing the actual legal work that they are trained to do. Anything else, delegated, pushed out, and then I help that filter out from a sort of overall perspective. So that's kind of how it looks day to day. But it's bespoke, obviously, because it depends what that someone does, how their life is running. But it's generally just about making tweaks to how they're living already. This isn't about coming in and completely reinventing the wheel because, again, that isn't going to work. That's not going to land. That's not going to change the needle for them. They don't have time to implement anything new. But working in real time creates that time for them because not only are we doing stuff together and getting rid of all that quicker stuff, but we're looking at the diary declining things. We're saying no to meetings that, again, doesn't require their specific mindset, skill set for. And even clawing back 15 minutes of a day, that's a couple of hours a week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that sounds incredible. What actually gives you the background to be able to have that perspective, to be able to brutally prioritize? So, what is your background in order to be able to have that kind of perspective as an outsider that would be beneficial to women?
Yes, so that can be a bit of a stumbling block and sometimes a little bit of an obstacle through people wanting to work with me, but then having that hesitation where they think, well, she doesn't know anything about me, she won't have context, how will she know? She's not going to make the right judgment call, that kind of thing. I mean, I do this alongside the client. It's not something that I go off and do on my own. But it's because I'm not in their life that I can give um, instant priority to things, because I don't have that working relationship with someone that you've always gone to a meeting with. I don't have that commitment to a project that you're delivering. But because I don't have those things, I can take a real objective view and say, okay, another example, you've got a project that's due in on Monday. You have not been able to write your summary report this week for one reason or another. What's actually going to happen if that report isn't delivered? And they will have to say, well, the company might lose millions of pounds because this report is actually having a knock-on effect for something else. So if it's something like that, we make the time. Something like that, other things get shifted. If it's really late, it should have been 2 weeks ago, I've just been stalling on it. Right. In that instance, all we're going to do is manage expectations. We're going to talk to the other person, have an honest conversation. This is where we're at with it. What part of the report can I send you today that you can be getting on with? And in the background, I will then finish the rest of it by, and then you come to an agreement with a new deadline. So it's about just putting a real fresh perspective on things that they're really knee deep in, because they've got the working relationship, because the work is theirs. It's also personal. They're in the trenches. I'm not. So I can see the importance, I can see the urgency, I can see the deadline, but I strip away the emotion because I'm not involved. I see it for literally the black and white, for what actually has to be done. And that's the incredible value for me now working live. And that's why it works. So, as for my background and how I've kind of got here, I've organised women of this nature for well over 20 years, men too, but primarily women. And I resonate with these ladies because I am one. I have my own family, I'm running my business. I've come out of a PA career within multinational law firms across. I've worked in London for a good 10 years as a legal PA, and I've organised partners, senior associates, people of very different standing within the legal world for years. So I've learned to juggle a thousand plates in one go. And after doing it for such a long time, I got to the point where I was having to prioritize like this for them, because they would just let the deadlines just go by. They would let, things would just fall through the cracks because I was their gatekeeper. I was the one that picked up the pieces. So now, and which is why I stepped out of one of the reasons I stepped out of my career, was because I saw the need to then proactively up level that, to put their own lives back in. So to put their personal life back in as well as their career, because quite often someone's personal life isn't included. It's all about organising work, because apparently if work's organised, then your personal life just slots in. But it doesn't work like that. It's a real blend. And I really believe that actually, if you've got, I won't say balance because I don't believe in one, but if you've got a your own version of that blend, right, and it always moves. There's never a perfect example of that because it changes depending on where you are in life. But if you've got something that's working for you, I absolutely put money on it that you have something in your personal life in that as well, because then that elevates into your career.
Yeah, I think the way that you've put it with having a blend rather than a balance is a really great analogy, especially fitting with today's climate and the way that work is transforming in the wake of AI. And, we've never, communication and speaking to people and the pace of work at which we can get accomplished has never been this fast. And it's only going to hasten with AI, with greater automation and greater tools at our fingertips to support getting things done at a much more rapid pace. So I think blend is a really good way to put it, that the agility of your life is kind of flowing and moving, maybe like a little bit of a wave,
Yeah, yeah.
depending on what you've got going on. And I can see that you definitely have a substantial perspective to bring because you basically spent your whole career working as a PA. What actually made you focus specifically on women? I know you mentioned that you feel because you are a woman, you relate to them. But was there a moment or a turning point that really cemented this decision, knowing that you might, kind of cut out a portion of your clients? Because truthfully, in some markets, for instance, men make up the majority of the executive leadership. So already that could kind of dwindle down your client pool. What really cemented that decision for you is saying, this is the way that I'm going to move forward with my business, and it's going to completely focus on.
Yes, there has been a few moments actually that have gone towards firming that decision, and it's about the huge inequality of that, what you've just said in terms of the C-suite execs being largely men. Um, I think it's incredibly empowering that there are slowly becoming more women on boards and more women with careers in that dynamic. So I wanted to be the one that actually helped them open that door and had that sustainability longer term, because without, no one can do everything. I mean, I'm sure the odd guy possibly will claim to have that accolade, but I I've never been one to say I can do everything. We can have it all. We can. It's just at different stages. I believe that we can have it all, and you need to choose what can fall through the cracks. So for me to support these women so that they can have the career that most of them actually really enjoy. They've worked really incredibly hard to get to where they are, but to then sustain it is then actually then putting their health usually at risk. So to have the support of someone that just working live, cutting through the noise, getting stuff done, making sure that actually only stuff that they is specifically for them on their plate, and then managing other things that filter out from there, including their own life. That for me is a really important piece in these women, like I say, gaining that sustainability to managing a life and that blend going forward, not just for them, but for their health, their family, and then for people coming up behind them, which I think plays in again with um, narrowing that gender gap, because I don't think us as women should wear that superwoman badge that still gets used so often, unfortunately. I think it should be very openly spread that yes, you can be CEO of whatever organisation. But you know what? I've got a lot of support to help me do that. I think that's an incredible standing that I openly share, and that's one that's really what firmed up my decision to focus on the women, because things do fall on women's plate. I know that I know there are many guys that wear the other hats and bring up their children and don't necessarily have a career, or they've stepped back, or it looks different in many ways. But unfortunately, the percentage is the other way. It does still fall on women's laps. So all of those things were all contributed as to why I focused on women. But I have actually just taken on a guy. So it
Oh,
isn't it isn't a completely, I won't take on guys. But for marketing reasons, I'm sure most of your listeners would agree that if you niche, it's far better for a business. And just by niching, you don't always um, negate anyone coming towards you, because the guy that I've taken on is incredible, and all of his pain points are exactly the same as the females that I work with. So, it should be a really long lasting working relationship.
That's refreshing to hear. And definitely, I think as well, since you are a, solopreneur, you have to be choosy with your audience and who you take on. And one of the things that you mentioned about women with things falling on their shoulders, it is an unfortunate truth, and the data from many research studies continue to show us that women actually have to work 10 times harder than men to go up the ladder, to earn that promotion. And they have to showcase that they're worthy in so many more ways. So that in and of itself puts this underlying stress and pressure, and it really can be such a burden that I can understand how your services help women see clearly when maybe the mountain of work is so high that they really can't see through on the other side, and it's maybe too overwhelming. And one of the things that I love most about your approach is how hands on and real time it is. You mentioned earlier that you work real time, you work live, you don't want to waste any other time. And you're not trying to add an additional to do or an additional layer on what these women or people have to do. It's about instead doing it with them. You're basically becoming her or his partner in crime. Can you walk us through how a live session with you typically works? Is there any planning that goes into it, or do you typically show up to the session with your client and everything happens then and there? And, they then divulge to you, for instance, what is on their mind, or what to-dos they have to navigate through?
So I show up after a time, and I get to know what kind of job they're in, business they run, that kind of thing, and where their role is in the organisation, and get some context as to where they sit in their life. Then I show up with a bit of planning, and so we can hit the ground running, basically. But in the early days, like today, actually, with this guy, a great example, we're starting today, completely fresh. I've got a little bit of context because I've obviously spoken to him before, but today will be solely firefighting, because at the moment he is in the trenches. He's got a handful of clients. He doesn't. He knows where he is with them, but actually that could be far better. He feels that he could be delivering better with them, but he doesn't really know how to navigate that. So we'll be looking at that for all of the clients, because although we're going to be talking weekly, by the end of the hour call with him, I want him to come off the call knowing where he is with each of the clients, what he has to do by the end of today, again, by brutally prioritizing all of his list that he probably has. So, and also by doing that, he's then going into next week with that clarity, with that freedom, so that he can use his time efficiently, productively, and spending time with his wife as well. He's got two young children. Knowing that if he spends 5 days next week doing the school run, work is not going to compensate for that. So it's putting him back in his life quickly, so that it has an immediate effect to alleviate that overwhelm that he's currently suffering. So that's how it looks in the really early days, because it's just about giving that back, that control, so they can breathe. And then once we get to know each other, I will then say, so thinking of another client, I will then say to her, right, how did Monday go? You had loads of time free. Did you actually get anything done? So we'd assign some things, but sometimes, which again is very common, if people have a lot of time, they don't end up really doing anything, because they think they've got hours. That will only take 20 minutes. And actually, by the time you get to, whenever you're leaving or whenever that sort of time period finishes, they've done nothing, because they're so used to working in a structured way. So even if you do have that situation, which is rare, I will still add some structure to it, lightly. But for this client in particular, she was planning out the summer holidays, school holidays for her children, and I said, well, don't spend too long on it. I'd set, even things like setting your timer on your phone, 20 minutes, get it done within 20 minutes, because although you do have hours, trust me, you won't, because actually, and it was the first thing she said to me this morning. She said, you were exactly right. She said, I couldn't believe it. She said, I could hear almost, she heard me in her head, because we've been working together for over a year now. So she knows those kind of things that I ask. And she said, I felt you move me on mentally, because she said, I'd gone over the timer. I completely ignored it. But she said, I heard you say, don't spend too long on it. And she said, I could have spent 2 hours, because the time was just there, because they're used to working towards deadlines. So it can have the opposite effect when you've got loads to do. So once we've worked together for a while, it's more about accountability, getting the momentum, and looking past the firefighting. So it's, how are we going to put you back in your life? Might be looking at goals. It's a touch of coaching. I'm not a qualified coach, but coaching definitely comes into it. So it's about, by September, as we go into Q3 and Q4, where do you want to be? Is the business really behind? Where are you? Where is the business? Have you got a new team joining? Honestly, it's a huge plethora of things that we can look at once we get past the firefighting and the day to day. Once they have that control back, we then look at putting all the other pieces in the puzzle back together.
I'm smiling inside, laughing about what you spoke about related to sometimes when you have more time, it takes you so much longer to get things done, or you put it off a little bit because you think you have all this time. I've definitely faced those situations
Oh, we all,
in my own life. And yeah, I don't know. It must be something related to human nature or psychology.
yeah.
Um, but I want to ask you, you keep using this phrase brutal prioritization.
Mhm.
What are some examples of tasks women think are urgent, but you help them let go of? So have you been able to, come up with any like conclusive statements that generally speaking, you've noticed that many women think something is super high priority, but from your perspective, they're really not. So this is the kind of task that you really help them let go of, because also earlier in the conversation, you talked about that a lot of people, and women in particular, want to do things themselves. It's a part of, I guess, having that control and in wanting to know that, I don't know, maybe it was done right, or knowing that it got done, generally speaking. So what have you helped people let go of?
So with the example I would use is probably um, the working relationship. So, in terms of everything being urgent and not knowing really where to start, and me using the term brutally prioritizing, um, is when a client might have been going to a meeting. It might be a board meeting. It might be something that really, really needs their presence, but actually something else they might have to leave the country. A client might be insisting on them coming to a pitch. Both of these things are really requiring them and them only. They can't send someone else. They really feel pulled. They need to be in both. How do they choose? So for me, it would be about working relationships. So the relationship they've got to this client with the pitch. If you don't go, are you going to lose them? Is your relationship that good with them that you could rearrange? Chances are it probably is. If they are absolutely insisting on you, and the board meeting needs you more, it's stripping out that emotion. So the client themselves usually finds it quite hard to do that. So that's then my job to ask them certain questions like the ones I've just used, to help them really think, how long have I known that person? Would it be the end of the world if we put it back a week? Or, what will happen if that pitch doesn't happen? Let's actually play out those scenarios, because quite often we don't do that in our head. All we're thinking about is, I need to be at the pitch. We don't then start to think, well, actually, what, is the project even due to start yet? Probably not. It's not something that's going to start straight away, but the client had got in their head that they wanted Stacy to travel, and they were looking forward to seeing you because you've got a really good relationship, and that's brilliant. So then it's just about managing those expectations, again, honest conversations, and just trying to move it and just saying, look, I would not ask if it was really, really imperative that we moved it, but assuring them that you can go just on a different day. And, how would that look like for them? Try and accommodate their suggestions for a new day. So that's how I brutally prioritize with them, because usually with something like that, clients find that really, really tricky, because obviously on a board meeting, they have to be there, especially when they're C-suite exec level. But if they've got a great working relationship with long-standing clients, etc., they also feel incredibly pulled financially for the business, and they don't know how to tackle that, how to open that conversation. Sometimes I'll draft emails for clients as well, because again, it's not knowing where to start. So it's about opening that door to things that they haven't really had to deal with before. And then in terms of letting go of things, I would be looking at their team. Who have they got around them? In order for them to let go of things, they need to have certain support around them, that trust, that autonomy in the people around them that can do things either not as well as them, but just they're happy that it's instead of them. Because sometimes our team around us, and actually our team should be the sheer opposite of us. We want other people to be duplicates of us, but actually we've all got our own strengths and weaknesses. And if we had lots of clones of us, then loads of stuff would never get done. Because if I had loads of people of me, no accounting would ever get done, or any, certain type of thing, because I avoid that stuff because I don't like it. I'm not great numerically. I'm far better in the trenches, problem solving, as we go. That's me. So for me to have a team should be the polar opposite of me. So it's looking at their team. How does that work? Delegation, we need to look at all of that, and that doesn't take a long time. But that's I don't just ask them to let go of things straight away, because again, it's not realistic. If they're not already doing that, I can't expect them to do that within a really short amount of time. The whole point of working with me is to build long-term sustainable habits and ways of working, systems, everything, the softer skills as well as systems within their businesses. Because once I step away from them, I want them to carry on. I don't want it all to fall apart. So in essence, I've actually built a business model that works without me in in longer term. But that's the hole that I saw that I wanted to fill as a business owner. And that's what I do now. So I'd say working with me, the life cycle is probably around 6 months, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, but primarily it's around 6 months that I can usually get someone from, I don't know where to start. I just don't know where to start. I've been living like this for years, to actually, I can actually see how this is working. And I've actually started doing some of this stuff on my own. Because that is breakthrough stuff for me, and it's just amazing when we get there. So it's usually around 6 months.
You said you gave two really great examples. The first example was about, really making sure, like, for instance, that brutal prioritization in the context of women having obligations that conflict with each other, and being able to comfortably face a client or a business partner and ask, can the meeting be moved? It's so simple, yet I definitely empathize with women in leadership positions who have often not felt like they could challenge the date or come back, because the thing is I've been in that position, and I definitely have felt an immediate defense in my body. Like, you feel the emotions in your body. It's a physical response. And when you receive that message and you know that it's completely conflicting, you're not able to be in two places at once, the travel dates just don't suit you. It almost can kind of consume you so you don't think clearly that, "Hey, you know what? I could actually come back," or how, weighing the client relationship, as you said, and really thinking about, is this something that's really gonna tear down, let's say, an 8-year partnership?
Yeah.
And it probably won't. So I think that that's a really nice thing that you can offer as a third party in terms of being that neutral ground to strip people out of the emotional response that they have to that and being able to face it in a tactical and practical manner.
Mhm.
And then the other thing that you talked about with having, the ability to delegate, but more importantly, having the right team around you. This is something that I have always embodied in my leadership philosophies. I have always wanted people around me that were even smarter than me,
Yes.
brought something different to the table, had a different perspective because I wanted to understand how does this person look at this situation, and I don't want it to be the same as me because I wanna have that diversity of input, but also when it comes to delegation, and I can certainly understand that you can't, expect your client to just immediately delegate if that's something that they haven't been doing because delegation hinges on trust,
Yes.
and trust is something that you have to build over time and have that confidence that you can relinquish control. And what this is all really culminating to is a lot of the mental load that goes into being an executive and the mental load of the decision making, the emotions that you feel, the pressure, all of the invisible stuff that many people don't see. They see usually on the exterior a
Yeah.
confident executive who is articulate and seems to always have their shit together.
Absolutely.
But on the inside, what you're really uncovering is that actually many of these people face these invisible barriers and things that weigh us down, and especially ones that aren't even on the calendar, they live in our heads.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
what are some of the silent burdens or mental loads you see high-powered women carrying that affect their performance and more importantly, their peace? And how do you help them kind of shake that pressure to conform to productivity trends that weren't really built with them in mind?
Um, so I'd say this actually ties in with bringing their personal life in. So this isn't about um, going to a Zumba class or something like
Mm,
that, 3 o'clock in the afternoon or something. But I find that once we get something in our personal life, once we've got something for us, in whatever way that looks like, at running, yoga, you know, picking up that book that you've been looking at for ages, having something for you that isn't related to anyone else, work, children, nothing. You show up to meetings, to to life quite different because you are replenishing. It's like I use actually myself in this example with the sun, and I know that you're in a very hot
mm,
country. But as I'm in the UK and we don't get to see the sun that often, it's a gorgeous day today. So, and this weather for me literally recharges me. It's literally like plugging me back in.
yeah.
And every now and again, I just need to be left in the sun like a lizard to just recharge. And that's my thing. I mean, I am a runner as well, but once I've had an hour or something just to kind of be outside in the sun, just chilling out in the sun, everyone around me benefits, my clients, my family, everybody. That's what I do for me. And I know that that makes a huge difference to me. Um, so it's about, some women don't even really know what their thing is because they've been so driven and so working long hours for such a long time. They've got a new identity pretty much. So it's about carving out very small snippets of time for them to re-establish them. It's about going for walks. It's about meeting their girlfriends for a coffee or something really simple, if you like, but just about them spending time with them in their head, just to go, oh wow, I'm like I've not noticed that before, or just talking to their girlfriends again about their lives as opposed to what's going on in their life. It's once starts to get that hole starts to get plugged, if you like, um, you start to have a real knock-on effect with work. You're showing up to meetings, showing up to really difficult situations, going for non-exec roles, starting to step outside of the normal role that they do, starts to become easier because they're doing stuff out of their comfort zone because something else has just been working. They're given that extra boost of confidence because they know who they are. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think it's very important for one to maintain a sense of self. And one thing that I've discovered as I continue to grow older is that you need to be fulfilled in your own self, that
Mm.
there's nobody else out there, and certainly no thing or object that can make you feel whole. It's about identifying what your purpose is and what helps you feel, the energy and, gives you that boost, and as you said, recharges your batteries
Yeah.
to be able to authentically be you. And I think it's very true that it can be difficult for women in high powered positions to maintain that time for themselves because often, again, they feel the pressure of having to perform, and they, more often than not, as you said, put their health on the back burner, put everything related to themselves on the back burner. So it is encouraging that you are, acknowledging that these women should be incorporating something that makes them feel whole, that their whole life shouldn't be 100% work. And, when you're looking at who you're working with, I mean, these women sound superhuman. I mean, they have their own super gene, right? They're strong, accomplished, in control. But what have you learned about the emotional toll behind that facade?
That they're no different. They're women. They're still, sometimes they're still reliving trauma from their childhood. They're still, they might have gone through a messy divorce or something, and they're still putting on that facade, like you say. In the meeting room, they're still showing up as their best selves, but actually inside they are still the youngster that just wants to kind of just have a break, and but they're so used to just showing up being the robot. And there's an end to that. There is an end to that, and it doesn't always end very nicely. So it's giving them that outlet to use me as a sounding board, as a complete confidant. Everything obviously we speak about stays between us, um, and seeing where it comes from. And I am no therapist at all, but stuff comes up when, they usually work in male heavy industries, in boardrooms, so they're even more, they're aware that they need to be of a certain confident level, and they're just always second guessing themselves. Imposter syndrome is huge. So sometimes it's about, do you know what, right now we're going to do 10 minutes. We'll look at everything you've achieved in the last year. So one of my clients has got their mid-year review coming up, actually, good example. And she's saying, oh, I don't feel adequate for asking for a bonus or anything. So I just said, look, bring up your calendar. Let's go through everything that you've achieved, all the clients that you've brought on for this massive organisation. We're going to write them all down. And we wrote them all down. And she was blown away, actually, at how much she'd achieved in this previous 6 months. So it's just about the basic stuff that we know you have to, well, we know you have to feel that you need to show up like that, but actually, where's that coming from? Because that isn't in your job specification. because you need to show up. That's completely made up. So it's about plugging in, restoring those batteries from a professional side, and reminding them that they got this role. No one else does this role. They physically do that. No one else is showing up and they're sort of pretending that they're doing the work. They are completely capable. They've held this role down for X amount of years. So sometimes it's just a reality check, because I think
Mm.
sometimes they're so used to second guessing themselves in their head that you get a constant cycle going around, that I just pattern interrupt, that I can hear what's in their head, and that we throw evidence at it. Okay, so if you think that you aren't worthy of being in this role, all right, let's look at the evidence. Where have you come from? What's your background? What makes you, not, I don't obviously job interview them, but I challenge them on it. I become their voices in real life. So I'll say all the stuff that they're going through mentally out loud and say, all right, well, if you don't think you're worthy, tell me how you are, and sort of not have that kind of almost comedic back and forth. And they start to sort of say, well, no, I am. And well, why have you said that? Why did you go for the role? What evidence have you got? And they start to actually prove to me, which is obviously themselves, because I'm playing out their head in real life. And then eventually it's quite a funny exchange, because I'll just say, well, look, you've just
Yeah.
proved to yourself. You've
You're
done this.
basically you're basically a mirror for your
Yeah.
clients,
Yeah.
and it can be a vicious cycle. And I know you said you're no therapist, but
Mm.
certainly it sounds like it
They
can
can be
almost
tough with
be
that.
a very therapeutic release for them to be able to offload
Yeah.
these thoughts that are coming into their mind. And one of the practices that I actually try to instill with myself and with my team is to maintain just a simple running list of your accomplishments, because definitely when it can come time to a mid-year review or even a full year review, you forget so much of what has happened. So I actually like to make it as a monthly practice where at the start of each month, take 10 minutes and reflect back on the previous month and just make a note down. What are some of the projects that you did? And if you started a project and it's still ongoing, just write it down too and see if the next month, if it closes out or what the outcome was. And it's very helpful for keeping these things in track because we do often forget.
Yep.
I want to know, have you ever had a time though where you wanted to tell a client something but you chose to hold back? And if so, what do you wish more women at the top would hear or believe about themselves? Because you just mentioned so much about imposter syndrome and
Mm.
really bringing to light the reality that although many of us might think that these people are incredibly confident, that they are human at the end of the day and they do second guess themselves. But because you've been on the receiving end of that, what do you wish women could hear or believe that maybe would take some of that away from in terms of the negative self-talk that they have in their head?
Um, I think, I mean, thinking of one particular example, I think the confidence they have in their professional life, sometimes it can be frustrating, but I understand completely why they don't always show up as confidently in their personal lives. So, one particular lady who isn't a client anymore, but she was, needed to split from her husband. It wasn't going well, and because there was so much animosity and sort of lots of bumpy times, that started to eke into her professional life, as it would. But I couldn't say to her, just leave him, because that isn't my decision to make. I could see it coming, and there were lots of different issues that were really overlapping, and over time, it was just more and more and more, and her career and her work and how she was showing up and everything was really, really taking a hit. And she just kept putting it off. It'll be fine, and all those kind of things. But actually, if she'd have used the same, because if something like that was, if that bigger issue was in her work life, she would have absolutely annihilated it. She was fantastic at decision making, brilliant at her role, but she just couldn't or wouldn't get to that stage in her personal life. She got there in the end, but it took years. It took years. So that was frustrating. But like I say, completely understandably, because it was her husband, and they've been together for a long time. But should she have used the same amount of confidence and self talk from her work life in her personal life, she would have moved away from it. It would have been better for them both in the long term because it wouldn't have lasted as long. But so that kind of thing happens, not very often. Um, but that, yeah, so, and that obviously wasn't my call to make, or even really sharing.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so a bit of a
I
tricky one.
can understand that definitely, you couldn't come and say, leave your husband, although the writing was on the wall and it was clear as day to you. And this is honestly probably one of those situations where her emotion and the longevity and the history of that relationship, and, oftentimes in a relationship, when you're in it, it can be so hard to see that it's not right for you or that you should make a split. And yet your friends or the people around you that know you best can very clearly see it. But it's so true that if you are the one in that relationship, until you can see it for yourself,
Yeah,
you can't walk away
absolutely.
because you don't have that, assurance and confidence. You're almost too scared to succumb to the reality that it is time to walk away. So that's definitely a tricky situation to navigate. And for sure, I applaud you that, you didn't butt in, but it's interesting to see, what you talked about where she was so confident and had this kind of situation been present in her work life, she would have been, brutally honest and able to disseminate the situation. But when it came to her personal life,
Yeah,
it was more difficult.
yeah, yeah.
That has to be, challenging when you face those moments because obviously it makes your work more personal and it brings a bit of a human element, and it's not
Oh,
just all about the work. You're really actually forming this deeper
mm,
connection with your clients.
yeah.
And,
It goes
you
in.
know,
It's a blend. It is a blend.
yeah,
That's a great
yeah,
example of how the
exactly.
personal life has a massive effect on our work. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It really does show how the two are interchangeable, as you said. But what I wanted to ask you as a result of this, because there is a bit of personal coming into the professional realm that you're dealing with, what's something unexpected or powerful that you have learned from the women that you've worked with that's maybe changed you personally or professionally?
Um, so I've learned through working with a myriad of women, and a couple of guys, that pushing doesn't always keep momentum going or give the results you want. So I think naturally as humans, when we're working on a project or we think of working hard, we think long hours, we think head down. Productivity means sitting at our desk doing work in whatever way, that in whatever context that looks. But actually, I found that recharging ourselves, like me being in the sun
Mm.
however long, has actually got momentum better for me and has given me better results, because since I've started plugging myself in more over the last couple of years, I've my business has done better because I've been showing up better as myself, because I'm looked after. I've put myself back in my own life again, which is, obviously why I now deliver this as a business. So it's that element, I would say, that I've learned to put in practice and make time for, because I know how important it is. Because quite often, when we start to take time for ourselves, however that might look like, we immediately feel guilt. It doesn't feel productive. We wonder what the hell we're doing because there's loads of other things that we could definitely do instead of that. But hanging on to that and just doing it anyway, making it a habit, will always give you better results in anything what you're doing. Because although you don't think you have enough time, you can always create time for yourself because you can do it in so many different ways. And that comes back to me saying that I create time for these women, um, because I know the importance of putting them or me back into my own life. So that I would say is my biggest takeaway.
I love that. I can completely relate because for instance, my recharge of the batteries is working out. I really enjoy first thing in the morning, right when I wake up, doing some kind of movement. It wakes me up, it makes me feel good, it gives me my energy hit for the day, and I show up much better. And on the days where I don't, I'm unable to do that, I definitely feel more sluggish. I don't necessarily think as clearly. And as you say, you aren't, able to maximize the output that you could give within that time. I really have so much enjoyed this conversation. I think it's incredibly powerful what you are, on a mission to serve for women. One final question I have before we close is for the woman that's listening right now who feels completely maxed out, unfocused, or like she's totally slipping behind and cannot get a grip. What's the first thing that you'd want her to hear from you?
So yes, and that's usually a great starting point for me. Music to my ears, not so much to theirs. That's where my brain dump came from. So you mentioned in my intro at the beginning, um, when everything is just noisy, busy, just overwhelming, where do you begin? It's a really good question. And that's the brain dump. So that's about literally spilling out everything from your head onto paper in no order. So again, because we're working with C-suite execs and people that are used to working in order with structure, I'm now telling you to completely bin that idea. I want you to just go completely freestyle, get it all out on paper. So I do have a free template that you can use to do this because I do add some structure because I know the common obstacles that this, you ladies do face. So I've given you some structure. I basically separate the main areas of our lives: travel, work, family, different areas of our life, so that you can split it and see some kind of order. But just brain vomit all of it out. You will be absolutely amazed at what's in your head. Um, it will be even longer than you think, and it may even well add to the overwhelm then, because you then see the huge amount of stuff that's in your head. But I guarantee at least a quarter of it will just be noise, will just be stuff that we just carry around in our head, conversations with our husband that have just been playing on repeat for the last couple of weeks, that actually is done. We don't need to carry that around anymore. So it's a little bit like journaling, if anyone's done journaling before. Because again, something I've learned, I've done a lot more research into time management, very traditional time management and how the brain works and those things around it. Our brains don't have any idea of time or perception of time at all. By us saying we need to do something by Friday at lunchtime means absolutely zero to our brain, because it's just completely alien. So by putting this extra pressure on ourselves, all our brain hears is we've got to get that done, which is why then obviously me pulling the emotional out of it helps brutally prioritize. But by brain dumping everything out, you can then strip all the noise, so strip everything out that doesn't mean anything, and then you can put actual deadlines in, lifting it off into your diary. Where's the stuff that actually has to get done? And then that's when you try and remove the emotion, working relationships, all those things that we've discussed. And then you will have stuff left on there, of course you will. But the stuff you'll have left on there is stuff that can be done over a longer period of time. That can be stuff that might be able to delegated. It might be things in your personal life. It might be quick fire personal errands that you've done at a weekend. You can start to pull things out of it that actually matter, that do have to get done. But by the sheer process of alleviating your brain, of carrying it all round, is really therapeutic. I did have one particular person say, "Oh, I'll put that on my to-do list to do a brain dump." And I said, "No, don't do that. That's completely different in the object because you're then making it a job. If you're finding it hard to even do the brain dump, and I'm talking 20 minutes, it doesn't have to take hours. Give yourself a timer. Put a 20-minute timer on. What can you get out of your head in 20 minutes? That will still really, really benefit you. Um, if you want to do it over a longer period of time, have a pad next to your laptop wherever you work and just throw things at it through the day. And you can do it over a longer period of time. But as long as you're extracting the stuff out of your head, that's where I'd start. And that's where I tell everyone to start, whether they work with me or not.
I really love that, and I can envision the alleviation of the mental load
Mm.
from one's brain when they go through this exercise. Thank you so much for your honesty and, really being completely open with everything that you do. If listeners want to find out more about your work or book a session with you, where should they go?
I'm really active on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Abigail Langridge. I can put contact details in your show notes, Stacey, but I'd say LinkedIn's probably the best place to find me.
Great. Thank you so much for joining today.